Welcome and thank you for clicking on my video. I really do appreciate it. And also, I'm very glad that we were pointing out the fact that NVIDIA did have this 30-minute divergence up here. Now, a lot of the time people do try to get you to call tops, right? Get to call the top, but calling a top can be very, very difficult. It's just the way the state of the market was. The signal that we've used multiple times started to pop up here, and it's pretty much our 100% signal here for NVIDIA right now, and it is confirmed, and there's always a way for that to not happen. So we're going to pay attention to that a little bit today as we get into some technical analysis for the SPY Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, NVIDIA, AMD, and Meta going forward, looking at GME, AMC, and the volatility, some important things going on across the board. So we're going to get into that. But first off, the reason that we were pointing towards some weakness here for NVIDIA is because we've used this signal before, and we mentioned it in the past couple of videos where we used it down here for a bullish trade. We used it down here for a bullish trade, and we used it up here for a bearish trade, and you're seeing it once again. So this signal has played out 100% of the time. The last 3 times we've really seen it, we've seen it play out. And so that's why we were paying close attention to it. We even had a 30-minute diversion here to help us out. So that is why in yesterday's video and in the live show this morning, you heard me talking about my opinion. You know, I don't always give the exact opinion that I have at this moment, but the way that things were shaking up, it really looked like NVIDIA had to tear down for the market to tear down. And I pretty much was saying, hey, this thing might have 24 hours left in it. It might have one more little push like this, but it could be done right now. And that was proven today as we did confirm this. So we are going to get back into NVIDIA a little bit later on. We always have to be managing our risk. And Tesla just put out some earnings, and I think it's seeing some upside. So let's get into it. All right, now the good part is we got a win, right, on this trade, just like the last time, just like into here, right? We get wins, and now we have to think of what's going to happen next. So for the SPY, just real quick, get those daily expected moves up for you, 582.79 to the upside and 573.19 to the downside. Key thing that happened today. Look where we went to. Look what we could not close below, the weekly expected moves. If you are not convinced that these weekly expected moves are helpful yet, you really need to start looking at these charts inter-week, because this is very important. This is as low as the options market saw it going. You notice when we're flushing, where does it stop? Right where the market maker really wants it to. So we have to pay attention to if the 2-hour can curl up. That's going to be our main point right now with the SPY. We're going to mention it first thing so you can hear from it right now. Look where the 2-hour is. We've seen crazier things like this before, even though these are pushing down, right? The daily expected moves are rotating down. We still have to be aware that if this 2-hour is able to cross up, we could see something crazy in the other direction. Just because we see one downfall doesn't mean we have to get overly bearish. That is the signal that will hurt you if you have a bunch of short positions. That being said, I like to go with the biggest time frame. When you have multiple things showing up, right? We have a MACD close to the center line on a 2-hour. What's the best thing for me to pay attention to right now is going to be the bigger time frames. Right now, the daily scale has crossed over. So we do see that the daily is tapping out. And even if we make some kind of move here, a lower high might be the most probable thing. Because when that daily crosses down, it's kind of one of my rules. I mention it in the courses that are down there in the description. If you want to learn how to find these type of setups, 90% off. It is going away in November. I highly encourage you get that while it is on sale. You can get both courses right now for only $150, and that is fantastic. Get yourself to learning. You will see indicators in a new light. You will understand these weekly ranges very, very well and how to really utilize them. Now, that being said, if we're going to get a lower high, what are we really looking for here? And this is where you want to pull up a 30-minute. The 30-minute is going to be important. So the 30-minute is deep into negative territory. You notice it is deeper than this last time. It is deeper than even over here, right? It is deeper than when we made the little divergences here for this upside move. Okay, so we are deeper into negative territory, meaning what? We are far away from going into a positive trend. The other thing is that little zone that I built for you yesterday, right? This zone, very important. Notice we were able to cut through that, and so now we can use that area as resistance. One thing to point out with the SPY, this level right here of about, I would say 580.50. Notice that 580.50, you gapped above that. Notice that when you broke below it, you completely take it back really quickly, even though you saw little wicks in here of resistance. Notice that when you do see weakness, where did you bounce off of? That level right there. Notice what you bounce off of, that level right there. We gap down to it and we lose it right away, and you flush. So that means that level is very important. If we do react all the way up into the top of this zone and then we start to reject, watch out, because there are no reversal signals here for the SPY. Now, if this is something that took market makers off guard, if this took, some people off guard in any way who have some big power out there, you can see this just V-shape. We can see something crazy. That is why we want to pay attention if that 2 hour can cross up. But just to be clear, right now, the daily signal is saying, hey, more downside is the most potential thing for the SPY. Even if we get a bounce, it is most likely to be a lower high. Okay, but if that 2 hour can cross up, we can use this as some support or dip back down into it. We can see how we can head higher with this type of look from the SPY. It's just not something that I'm necessarily leaning towards, but I am totally open to it. And I'm just going to keep going because there's so much to say here. This is the last thing I'll say is if this does end up making a 2 hour move higher, you bought yourself a little bit of time. Congratulations, but watch out for November because you might see some kind of rug pull. Very briefly, I wanted to go over IWM and the Dow real quick because those saw something even crazier. We saw a gap below the weekly expected move. Notice that is marked off as an important level. Where do you try to find support? Right at that weekly expected move. Where do we gap below? Because we don't want those buyers to step in. Well, the weekly move, we use it as resistance all morning and then boom to the downside. Now we see something popping up here, which is this divergence is very, very flat on the MACD, but you do have a bunch of divergence points down here for the RSI. Still rather flat, but a tiny bit up there for IWM. Is IWM saying that the 2 hour is going to bounce here? That is something that I'd be paying attention to. Now to quick note, we want to pop over to the daily because the daily is showing that IWM just got a crossover. Okay, now it did get a test of the 50, so we have to pay attention if this daily can build back up from there. But for now, you're just saying, hey, we have the divergence points. Those are confirming, and this could get ugly, especially as you're outside of those weekly expected moves. You want to be very cautious with something, even if it has a reversal signal. I mean, that can play out, but am I going to take that play? No, I'm not, because I really believe in the fact that daily has crossed over. Daily momentum is stronger. Okay, I talk about that a little bit in the course, but you can see that that daily has crossed on the MACD. The RSI is getting below the center line, right? Getting below that center line there for the RSI. That's a big deal, especially as you are outside of a weekly expected move. That means if you're not able to build back into this and hold back in that range, and you see that daily continue to go down, that's where crazy stuff happens. That's the 32% time. So I'm going to be very cautious with this, but I wanted to be clear in saying that the 30-minute does have a signal down here. I don't think it's the best signal in the world, but I think it's enough to say, hey, it would make sense for us to try to build back from here, and maybe this is some kind of fake out. As we go over to the Dow, I'm just going to use the DIA because we do have the weekly expected moves here for it. You'll notice, what did we do with the weekly expected moves here? We violated them completely. We were trying to hold up, and then we've just flushed. And notice here about the Dow, it's a little different story than IWM. You are seeing downward for the MACD, right? This is following the price action a little bit right now. You don't necessarily have those divergence points. So that's telling you if you do get a bounce, it is likely to fail because of the positioning of the MACD. So that is what is happening. We were talking about in real time. This head and shoulders could already be built. If we start to crash through this, right, what we want to see is us break through that very cleanly, go retest that breakdown area being something like 427. And then see if that's able to use it as resistance again. Then if a reversal signal pops up, we'll pay attention because volatility, we're pretty much in a bear market right now. You're behaving like a bear market according to volatility. So that's why I wanted to bring these things up. But I wanted to show you the Dow, DIA, but the Dow again is because the daily has crossed over and you are in an area where crazy things happen. So it tells you be very, very cautious with taking upside plays when you see something like this. Because yes, this can build back. I'm not saying it can't. IWM has divergence. This thing can just turn back around. That's perfectly fine. We will react to that. But if I see a daily first crossover in the unexpected area, that could flip gamma levels into negative gamma. We could end up down to 418.65 or something like that. Pretty quick here, right? Within like a day. And then if you start to do this, well, then you're talking about grabbing that liquidity and heading even lower. So be very cautious with this. Last thing to note is weekly charts have not crossed over. We're going to go over the weekly charts on Saturday. If you'd like to join us, please subscribe. The SPY has crossed over on the daily, the IWM has crossed over on the daily, the Dow has crossed over on the daily, and so have the Qs. Now notice this for the Qs though, where did it react to? Weekly expected move. We're going to get into those shorter time frames here for the Qs, looking at this 2 hour as of right now, as it's pretty close to the center line, but we just crossed over. I believe this was this morning, right? So we just crossed over. Can this thing bounce back? Of course it can cross back, right? So we need some levels to pay attention to for tomorrow. That would be 494.55 to the upside, and then we do have 482.17 to the downside. So the key thing with this is, can this 2 hour still build back up over time? Can we see another move higher here for the Qs? And that's going to really, if we're not going to break down and we're going to end up exceeding these levels, we're going to have to curl up this 2 hour. So that is a big signal. If I have a bunch of shorts in the market, I would really be paying attention. And if that 2 hour crossed up, I'd say this is not the right timing to be in a short position. As you look at the 30-minute, what are you noticing? Even deeper into negative territory here, deep into negative territory for the 30-minute. If that crossed up, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's possible. It's not in a crazy level, but we're deeper than the last time, right? We're deeper than the last time, and that struggled. So who's to say this isn't just going to react up to what? The breakdown area. So as I spread this out, you're going to notice, kind of like with the SPY, we kind of have a key zone that we've tagged multiple times. It'd be this zone right below my pink line here. It'd be this zone right here. And this is a very important line. That's as high up as we're supposed to go in 2024. And notice another bad thing happened above that area. So be very cautious above that pink line. But for the most part, I think we do have a good opportunity, as implied volatility has obviously spread out for the Qs, right? Big move priced in for tomorrow. Look for a retest of 491.33. If we can retake that and hold that by end of day, all of this might be a blip. But if we go up and we touch those levels and then we start to reject, that's going to be a big problem. Now from there, we can pay attention to divergences and stuff, but for tomorrow, we just want to see if this upside is going to last or if it's going to reject off of that about, I would say, 491.50 level. Now, if we're going to exceed that, look for that 2 hour to cross. We have a lot of stuff to pay attention to. If you'd like to watch stocks live with us tomorrow morning, we will be live right away at the open, so we can watch this kind of stuff with you guys. Apple, we were talking about the fact that, yeah, this could be some kind of cup and handle, right? We like to talk about the bullish and bearish cases, but we just said this is very controlled, and I would watch if that crosses over. It crossed down early on in the day, right? We already confirmed divergence. Now we're getting some kind of bounce, and that's ripped to the downside. The bad part about Apple doing this is the 2 hour confirmed it. And so we knew that there was potential weakness here, and if that 30-minute rotated back down, it was most likely going to get ugly. What happened? The 30-minute rotated back down and it got ugly. So we were kind of prepared for this because we saw the little divergence up here kind of making a double top. And now we got to look at daily scales. The daily scale has not crossed back down. That is very key to note here. The daily scale has not crossed back down. Even though you have wonky divergences all across this thing, the daily scale hasn't turned down. So what you're going to need to see is this to turn down. Apple and NVIDIA both need to turn down their MACDs for this to be the major top that I was talking about. And that hasn't happened yet. So it's very key to understand that this can still move higher. You do not have daily momentum on two of the biggest stocks holding up the entire market right now, as everything else is down a little lower. We can notice that NVIDIA and Apple are the ones really holding up this market. And so if Apple is able to curl down on a daily and NVIDIA is, that's when I'd really be paying attention. But for now, you have a 2 hour signal. Make sure to pay attention if that's turning back up, because you might need to manage a trade. Now we get into Tesla. Tesla giving a big double top signal up here. We were paying attention to it. We said, watch out for weakness. Sure, this could be a handle, but watch out because that's divergence and that could easily go the other direction. It went the other direction. One thing that we were pointing out for Tesla before the earnings was the hourly chart. You got one turn up here and it didn't turn up by end of the day for a hint for some kind of play if you absolutely felt like you had to take it. But a lot of people out there were talking about how Tesla has to save the market here. Tesla has to save the market. So something like this can help out, but we're not necessarily seeing it be beneficial for stocks across the board. We're more just seeing it be, hey, great buying for Tesla, a little bit buying for some other stuff. We're not seeing huge stuff. So if we open up the day, we can pay attention to a weekly expected move now that we got earnings, and we'll see if that continues to go up. But for the most part, we want to see, hey, this 2 hour here was getting up. It was trying to cross down. That meant bad, but we said, watch out for divergence in our zone. And where did we tag? We went right to our zone, tagged the top of it, maybe just shy of it, but pretty much there. And we'll notice that, boom, big upward move. Now, this is earnings. We're not saying that the technicals got this right because earnings is a 50-50 flip, okay? Technicals can be thrown out the window when it comes to earnings, but one thing you're going to want to watch early on in the day is this is a great reaction, but we were kind of looking for this reaction. We were kind of looking for us to go test the sell zone. This has become a sell zone as of right now. So pay attention, because even though we're taking back the 5 and all that kind of stuff, this could easily just reject off of there pretty quick, and then we see more downside because selling came in for some reason. I do believe that that was due to the difference between bonds, and I think bonds are looking pretty good for investors, so we'll see if investors fly to bonds, and we might show that signal that looks pretty good towards the end of this video. Amazon was another one that showed us 2 hour divergence, and that has confirmed. And was Amazon able to turn over the daily from that? Yes, it was. So that's going to be a big issue, because is this some kind of ABC move down? Or are we going to make some kind of divergence at the 200? We'll pay attention to that later on. But right now, you're turning down on a daily MACD. That is very worrisome. We're going to have to build back a lot in order to save this thing. So as you look at a 2 hour, still going to be a 2 hour. Can that 2 hour turn back up? A good hint of this would be looking at the 30-minute. Look where you really broke down from. All right, we really broke down, I would say, once we kind of got into our zone. So I'm really paying attention to this level of about 188. See if some kind of reaction can come. See if this crosses up. But if that crosses right back down, it's not going to be a good sign. One thing to note here still is behavior, right? The behavior of the 30-minute. If this continues to go up, you need to check if that 2 hour is curling up throughout your day, because that 2 hour is going to be important in saying, can Amazon really go test this high and go make a new one? Or is it going to reach higher levels in some way to create the structure you need to head higher, maybe a head and shoulders there? Or is this just going to flash positive throughout the day and then the big selling comes in at the end? So that's something I'd be paying attention to for Amazon. Just a note, it has crossed down on a daily MACD. One thing that has not crossed over on a daily MACD is NVIDIA. You're just getting a reaction to the 9. You did lose the 5. But for now, we have not crossed over on this MACD. We want to see that. And really, if you want to see a downfall, you want to see if this downfall is going to be extended for some time, you're going to have to reverse down this weekly chart. So you might have bought yourself a little bit of time. That's not a good looking bar, really. Both of these don't look very good together. Touching the top Bollinger coming down. So we'll see how this completes. But for the most part, you got to see this turn back down. You got to start seeing red down here on your histogram to say, okay, this can be an extended downside move. But for now, we don't have that. So let's look at the shorter time frames. As we go into a 30-minute, what are you going to notice? Well, the signal we were paying attention to yesterday live, and we mentioned it on YouTube, it played out this morning, right? It really played out. We said, hey, watch out. We even posted this to Patreon during the day so you could see it. Hey, NVIDIA's making a 30-minute divergence. It also has a 2 hour divergence, and it's outside of a monthly expected move. That tells us that NVIDIA has a 68% chance to land back down there by the end of October. So we were kind of expecting something a little bad, because we've used this signal a few times over the last few months, and they've been great trades, and they continue to be great trades. So you still have the divergence point. If that 30-minute does cross up, you're noticing it's a little bit closer to the center line, so you can still make a solid move here. But if you make a solid move here and people get euphoric, watch out, because your weekly expected move is right above you if you go make another point of divergence here for the 30-minute. Just means we might need to manage for the time being. It's seeing some positivity here. For the 2 hour, just noticing that this did have the divergence that we were talking about. We talked about this for, it was building for about a day. So we talked about this yesterday and during the live video. Watch out for it. But notice right as we're about to cross the center line for the RSI, we kind of whip back around. So we did end the day below the 5. So that's pretty important. This blue staggered line is your 5-day moving average. So this is going to say, hey, that daily has a good shot to cross down. But that hasn't happened yet. So until that happens, we can still see these little moves up, or a little move like this that rejects. Okay, so we'll pay attention to that for tomorrow, and I'll watch a 30-minute chart with you in the morning. AMD, weirdly enough, actually giving a pretty good reversal signal here. You see 2-hour divergence popping up now, which is fantastic. You actually see that down here on the MACD, kind of flat, but still there. See that on the RSI, little flat, but still there. It is still in the upward direction enough that if this went positive with a strong move, this actually might be able to curl up a daily chart. Where's the daily? It's right by positive territory. Now, I'm not necessarily leaning towards that. I'm more leaning towards a 2-hour rejection at some point, and I'm kind of paying attention to 160.83. I think a good move could happen here, but I think it might be a fake out in some way to maybe make another point of divergence for another big move later, or it could be the start of something really bad. So the 30-minute here did give you divergence points kind of all across this thing. Now, it was a very wonky move, wonky divergences, but you did get one in the near price action. Rather flat here for the MACD, but upward for the RSI. So if this has a chance to curl up that 2-hour, it's saying it's right now. So we'll see what happens with AMD in the morning. But this behavior here, not really liking it at this moment, kind of risky to take a play. One thing that gave no signs of turning back around, which actually is, right? We're seeing a little bounce in the post market, but you have some obvious levels to pay attention to. We have some fairly obvious levels to pay attention to here for Meta. One thing we were just paying attention to here was the fact that Meta was curling down on the 2-hour, right? The fact that it was looking like, hey, this thing's running out of gas on the 30-minute. Can it turn back down? It always can. It did. That escalated to the 2-hour, and we see some big bars down. So we were leaning towards a lower high for Meta because of the positioning of the MACD on the 2-hour. You see how it's going to take a lot more work than even this to go positive, right? So that's a lot of movement that you need. So you need some good structure throughout it to remain above that 5. We lose it, we head in the downward direction. Now, for this, you don't see divergence. You don't see anything like that. We can get reactions for retests and things like that. We may, on a lot of charts, want to reconnect with that 5-day moving average, give it a little test. But for the most part, we can see that Meta, we are leaning towards lower prices for a bigger pullback here. And that's mainly what we're talking about. And as we test bottom Bollinger, by the way, it is very likely we go test the 20 and the 5, maybe even tomorrow. So we'll pay attention to it. But if Meta's a little different, if Meta does curl up on a daily, we should expect more positivity. We'll pay attention to earnings. That still will be a 50-50 flip. AMC still holding some flagging here, still crossed up on a daily, but one thing that was happening today was the 30-minute was continuing to head down here. If you notice from AMC over the past day or two, we did get this 30-minute curl up and it curled right back down. So that tells us, hey, not the moment, but maybe this is able to turn back around, right? So anytime that this turns back around on a 30-minute, I will be paying attention as that daily is crossed up, but it's not looking the best for AMC right now. As you can see, the 2-hour has crossed down. That means what? Some negativity can come in, and we're already seeing that take place, but we did get this bounce. We'll see what happens with this. As GME sets up more reversal signals here, by the way. We were talking about the 2-hour making a higher low or coming to make a divergence down in these areas, and we're getting close to doing that. The only thing is we might turn around right now because we have a little 30-minute divergence here, and it did confirm at the end of the day. Now, this is GME and AMC. It's a very, very volatile. Well, it's more just like whenever this thing sees an upward move, expect it to get fought against, but this is not a bad signal right now for GME to turn around that 2-hour, and the daily scale for GME is crossed down. So you got to curl that thing back up. Once this thing curls back up, you'll start to hear me say, hey, there's a good chance for a big move. And you can see how this thing is really getting bottled up now, getting really tight in these moves. Can we see something crazy? We will update the crazy level for you next week. But for this week, it is 22.53. Come back for Sunday and we will update you about GME. We are getting into volatility, but make sure to stick around just for a little bit longer to talk about TLT, because that's the real reason I think we're heading down here. I was looking at this throughout the day just to see what was going on, looking at the correlations and all that kind of stuff. And I think TLT and the yields are a reason for us seeing a little bit of a downturn here today. So as we look at volatility, we'll notice what? Well, pretty obvious that we were looking for a 2-hour divergence here. We saw a 30-minute able to curl back up, and we still said, hey, watch if that turns back down, because we might make a 30-minute divergence here and a 2-hour at the same time. That didn't happen. This thing just curled up and kept going. So that's a big deal. Now, where did we stop? Well, right as we start to break above 20, right as the algorithms are starting to kick in, we actually see this thing subside. So if this 30-minute does curl down, well, that can happen overnight, right? This opens up at about 2 a.m. my time, Central Time. So if that does curl down, what if it gets by the center line? Then we get some bad news opening up in the morning. That's what we really need to escalate this selling at this point. If we get some bad news tomorrow, any kind of bad news tomorrow, and these daily scales might be hinting at that, but if we get bad news, we have the Dow in an unexpected level already. We have the IWM in an unexpected level already, and the SPY and the Qs are pretty much a sneeze away from getting there. So be very cautious if volatility continues to head up or curls up into positive territory with this, because then it might remain above 20. That's where things can get a little sketchy. We'll look for divergences if we're going to see some kind of reversal here, but for the most part, the 2-hour is curling up, trying to go positive at this moment. Big wick, so I assume we will see some kind of 30-minute pullback. The other thing is how you know when volatility will really be coming back in. The daily scale most likely will turn up, okay? The daily scale is still positive at this moment. You're still holding the crash signal. And notice that this 50 was turning down like, hey, I'm going to cross through and we're going to squeeze and everything's going to be dandy. Well, it's a good thing we were talking about, hey, make sure to wait until we're actually breaking down through that 50 until you start talking about a squeeze to the upside, because we are behaving like a bear market. We're getting some rip arounds as of right now. Starting to get more implied volatility going into tomorrow. And if this daily scale is positive and curls up, hey, that means positive move. That means take out the high, go make a new one. And maybe all of this was a cup and handle. So I'd be very cautious if volatility turns up on a daily scale. Now, since you stuck around for the end, I'm going to tell you what I was really looking at today. And what I was looking at was actually TLT and the SPY, right? So I was looking at both of these, showing how they both found a bottom in these areas. On the left is going to be the TLT, on the right is going to be the SPY. And something I just noticed was we were kind of moving in tandem with TLT. And then we see this separation where TLT drops down and the SPY makes this little move higher. And from that point, we see that TLT was able to drop down a little bit more than the SPY in this area, and the SPY started to catch up. But when this did actually happen, you'll notice that TLT started to head in the upward direction, right? And the SPY kept going down. So around this time right here, this date of about Wednesday, July 24th, we actually noticed TLT started to see a boom, which means those yields were actually coming down. Those yields were coming down. And what did the SPY do at that point? Well, the SPY made a little move, but then actually dropped lower. So what happened was the SPY actually snapped back to get back to where TLT was really reacting to, right? To keep going with this kind of trend. And where can we take into consideration this? Well, you'll see right here, TLT dropped. What happened to the SPY? The SPY dropped off. TLT then moved up. What happened to the SPY? The SPY moved up. But around this point right here, we actually notice, if we really zoom into this, and I'll zoom in a little bit, we notice that TLT started to drop off dramatically ever since, I would say, this point right here, the date being September 17th. We noticed that TLT actually started to head down like this, and the SPY actually headed in the other direction. And so something I believe that could be going on if we're going to see more of a pullback in this scenario, not necessarily a crash scenario, but more of a corrective move, is the SPY going to pull back to kind of catch up to what TLT is doing while TLT is giving those basing out signals? Because as we can notice, TLT will be reacting maybe up soon, which means people might be going into that, which means people might take their money out of stocks, because as TLT gets lower, that money looks pretty good, right? The yield being at the percentage that it is, they like those kinds of returns, pretty safe there, right? So we actually could see a time where we do see people fly into bonds, and that might be what's going on here, because as you look at TLT, you're saying, hey, the daily scale, does this have a chance to bounce? You're seeing a small divergence in the RSI. And if I go down into a 2-hour, you're going to notice what? There is a big steep divergence here for the MACD and RSI at the same time. I can draw those up, well, not like that, I'm terrible at drawing, but up for you, and up for you here. So you have divergence all across this. It's outside of a monthly, it's outside of a weekly right now. And if we go into the shortest time frames, this could get a reaction soon, because you're getting a ton of rejection divergence, and you're really trying to build back into that weekly move. So we'll see if that is going to happen, but I think you have a good likelihood that TLT sees a gain here. And we actually see the SPY drop off as people kind of get out of stocks and go back into these bonds for a little bit of time. And that would more be a pullback scenario. So let's think about that going forward. I just thought that was a nice thing to bring to your attention. And we did post a little bit about this to Patreon. So I think the main takeaway here is, are we going to see these big stocks like Apple, big stocks like NVIDIA actually confirm some daily downside? And I think that's a big deal. And then the other thing I'd really be paying attention to tomorrow is, are we just going to get some kind of 30-minute turn up and get rejected from some key levels? Or are we going to be able to curl up this 2-hour and go into positive territory, meaning we can actually cut through these levels and maybe actually end up going higher? And then from that point, we have to say, is that going to be some kind of crash at this point? Is that going to be some kind of trap is more what we want to treat it as of right now. Just a trap. You don't necessarily want to always be thinking that every drop could be a crash. But for the most part, the way that stocks are looking, if that turns down on a weekly, then that can start to add up to, hey, we might be going into a real crash here. And so we'll pay attention to that a little bit more as we see some more price action going into Saturday's video. So make sure you are subscribed. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for liking, subscribing. You guys are fantastic. I look forward to streaming with you guys tomorrow morning and looking at some stocks, paying attention to the craziness of Tesla. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Have a nice night. Peace.